Okay, we are up to the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. Yesterday we learned about the three shitas regarding a Shomer Yavim. We had first Rabbi Eliezer, who held that even if there's two Yavamin, if one of them did Maimer, like Rabbi Ami said, and Bezdin was already Mechayev, one brother, to support this woman, that brother would be able to be made for her Nedarim. Rabbi Yeshua said, Yeh Zika, if there's only one brother, then he could be made for Nedarim. If there's two brothers, no matter what happened, he can't be made for Nedarim. And then Rabbi Kiva said that by Shemeres Yovim, you could never be made for Nedarim. And in the final Brisa, the Brisa says that Rabbi Kiva claims, say if there's Maimer, say if there's no Maimer, doesn't make a difference. If there's one brother or two brothers, never can the Zika or the Maimer create a relationship strong enough that would allow him to be made for the nether. And the litmus test that Rabbi Kiva gave is whether or not there would be a Chiyuv Skila due to this marriage. That although if someone is Mekadesh a woman and then she's Mizana, she gets Skila, if she's a Nair Hamil Rasa, if she was a Yavama that her husband did Maimer on, that the Yavama did Maimer on, and she was Mizana, everybody agrees she's not Mechayiv Misa. And therefore, Zokra Bekiva, that's a litmus test that shows that the relationship of Zika, even with Maimer piled on, would not be a strong enough relationship to give the Baal rights to Hafara. I was listening to Rabbi Rosner on the way to Shul this morning, and he mentioned that in Yavamis there actually are some Rishonim who understand in Rabbi Eliezer Shita that Maimer is a Kinyan Gomer, that Rabbi Eliezer might hold that could be there is a Chiyuv Misa for Maimer. That's a Shaila in the Rishonim, and it's not the Furish. He said it was mashma from the Rishonim that could be there's such an understanding. That still doesn't answer David's kasha from yesterday because there was no Maimer done on Tabar. She was strictly a Shomer Yavim. Well, in Halacha, the Ran Paskin, like Rabbi Kiva, because it seems like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua didn't have a comeback to Rabbi Kiva's kasha, and therefore, for Nedarim that pre-existed any of her marriages, or Nedarim that were made while her husband was alive, those the father would be able to be made for. The Ran was not sure if it was a neder that was made after her husband died. While she was a Shomer Yavim, there would the father be able to be made for it without the husband or not? And now we can start the next mission. Pre-Kiyum. We learned that we discussed that you could be made for things in advance. Now we're going to discuss if you could be Mekayim things in advance. One who tells his wife, Kol Nedarim shetaduri mikan at she'avoy mimokim play. All of the Nedarim that you're going to make from this place until I return, which is a little bit of a weird expression, because usually if I'm trying to create a time, it should be from now until I return. Or if I'm trying to refer to a place, I would say from here until there. This is like saying, what takes shorter, to New York or by train? It's not a typical way to speak. So the Ran explains, what does it mean, Nikan, from here until the time that I return, Mimakim Plani? So the halacha is, and he said, Harein Kayam, and all those Nedarim should be Kuyim, Loy Amar Klum, it doesn't work. So let's just see the Ran, how he explains this expression, because it was a little bit of an unusual expression. Zok Tehelig Ran, Ha'imr le'ishta mikan v'at she'ova mibakim plani. Me'oysa shah she'etzim mikan. What he meant is from the time that I leave this place, not from right now, when I depart, as soon as I get on that airplane. V'at she'ova mibakim plani until I return. V'haini dekatani mikan, and that's why he used an unusual lashon of from here, but like katani miyayim zeh, and he didn't say from today. L'vishe'ein daito elam miyayim she'etzim mikan. He might be only living in a week, but he only wants his kiyum to be for Nedarim that she makes after he leaves, even though he might be making this proclamation well in advance. And that's why he doesn't want to be made for them mehashta, The Chayshinan, why is he not dealing with now? Why does he only want to deal with Nedarim that are relevant after he leaves? Why doesn't he care to deal with all the Nedarim from right now? Because Dilma Ba'ida Etla Tad Nedarim Sheyirtza B'Kiyuman. Because he might be dealing with, let's say she makes another that he wants, and he doesn't want necessarily to be made for them. And even though the first part of the Mishnah is speaking about Kiyum, the Mishnah continues to speak about Afara. So therefore, while I'm here, I'll deal with each thing on an as needed basis. When I leave, that's when I want to have this blanket. Just like we said a couple of days ago, with the apotropos, why is he making an apotropos? Why doesn't he just make for everything in advance? Because he's afraid that there's some nedarim she would make that maybe in fact he would want. Okay, Harei and Kayamin. He said from now or from when I leave until I get back, any nether she makes, I want to be Makayim. Lo Yamar Klum. What is the reason why it's Lo Yamar Klum? So let's see what the Ran says. The Dafka in Hafara, Amar Rabbi Elazar Mufar. We learned that someone could be made for something in advance, but you cannot be Makayim something in advance. Why? Mishum Kal V'Chomer Didei. We're soon going to see a Kal V'Chomer that Rabbi Eliezer made that allows someone to be made for something in advance. Kidim Afarish also. And that was the Kal V'Chomer? Im Hafra Nedarim Shabo L'Chlal Isser. After she already made another, and the Isser on her schal, Kainim Alai, this piece of cake. There's already Isser here. Shem Chazakim B'Yosy Kvar Cholu. That's another with some strength, because it's already chal and she's already also cake. Yet the husband could come along and say, "No, I'm being made for it. No longer another." So surely lo yafar nedarim shloi bo l'chal iser. We all know 1 ounce of prevention is a lot better than all the rectification afterwards. So if he could break a nether after she made it, he can surely prevent it from being chal in the first place, because at that point, before it was chal, v'loi chamiri kulahai. So Preemt, the Ran, so why doesn't the same theory apply to Akama? So to Ran, with Akama, the logic is the opposite. Avalin Akama adarabba, and the Hida Ashkechon, Nedarim Shachalu, the Chamiri Matzah L'Kiyumei. Just because we know that once she already made another schal, there he could be Mekayim it. Who said Man Leimalon Hachib Nedarim Shadayin Lechalu Galoyalibi? So the logic is exactly the opposite. By Kiyum, it would be much easier for him to be Mekayim a nether that's already there, rather than being Mekayim a nether that's not even there. Okay, so let's see the Mishnah again inside. That is not it's not a Kiyum, it doesn't work. What if he said Arehin Mufarin? Rabbi Eliezer Eimer Mufar. Rabbi Eliezer holds it works. The Chachamim Eimer Einim Mufar. The Chacham holds it doesn't work. Rabbi Elazar asked the Chachamim of the Kal V'Chomer, Im ha for Nedarim Shabo L'Chlal Isser, if a husband has the power to be made for Nedarim that already took set and is already in existence, so he has to uproot it. And we know the Torah says a husband could do that. Shalo Yafar Nedarim Shlo Bo L'Chlal Isser. Surely he should be able to be made for another that didn't even take set yet. Amr Loi, the Chacham told him that's not a good Kal V'Chomer, because the pasuk tells us that you shouldn't listen to such a Kal V'Chomer. Harei Omer Isha Yikimenu v'Isha Yifeirenu. The Torah compares Hakama to Afara. Es Sheba L'Chal Hakim B'L'Chal Hafer. Something that you could be Mekayim, meaning the nether is in existence already, that you could be made for. But Loi B'L'Chal Hakim. But if it didn't come into existence, and therefore you cannot be Mekayim it yet, therefore Loi B'L'Chal Hafer, you can't be made for it either. So we're trying to understand what precisely is the problem with being Mekayim and Nether that's not here yet. So the Mefarish tells us a svara. He says it's because it's a davar shaloi b'lo'olam. A davar shaloi b'lo'olam, you cannot be Mekayim. There are others who say a different shot, but the shot that the Mefarish is it's another shaloi b'lo'olam. So therefore, how can you be Mekayim something that's not yet in existence? I think others say a different svara. Let me see if I could find the other svara. Zokti it says Toshus Savyat, it says on the heading. Lefi she'enoi goimer beliboy lakayim. You know why it doesn't work to be Mekayim and Neder in advance of her making it? Because he doesn't really mean it. He doesn't really mean it. Sheyesh Nedarim shelo yachboch b'kiyumin. There might be some Nedarim that he won't want. So if he makes a blanket kiyum, he's not really making that kiyum because in the back of his mind he's afraid. Well, what if there's another that I don't like? I'm putting myself up too much on a limb. When someone's Mekayim and Neder in advance, it's as if it was a tos. Now, let's think about it. A blanket kiyum is another tos. But what if I said, if my wife makes a neder not to eat cake, not to eat chocolate, not to eat fat, I'll be Mekayim it. So there you don't have this far of neder b'tos. Because I specifically said, those nedarim I want to be Mekayim. So could that be a nafkamina between the shita of the Mefarish, who says it's a davar shaloi b'la'olam, and the shita of the Toshus Ksaf Yad, that it's only about a kiyum b'tos? But that will be very schwer, because then our Mishnah, when it says kiyum doesn't work, it's not really kiyum doesn't work. Kiyum could work. It's only because of the tos. So there are those who learn, there are those who explain that even if it's kiyum tos, even if he specifically lists off Nedarim that if she makes them, he wants to be Mekayim them, it still wouldn't work. Why? Because all it tells you is at the time that he made that kiyum, at that moment, he would have been happy with her making a neder not to eat chocolate. But how do you know when she actually made it, he didn't change his mind? So just because he wants it, when he's declaring he wants the kiyum, who said when she actually makes the neder, he's going to want it? And therefore, it's still considered a kiyum b'tos. There's a Yid in Los Angeles. Today, he's probably in the 70s or 80s, but by his vort, he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. And he came from an incredibly wealthy family. They're an incredibly wealthy family. By his vort, so his Rashiva, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the Rashiva of Torah Das, came to the vort, and he asked the Chazan, so how long are you going to sit and learn? What was the agreement? How long are you going to sit and learn? So this man himself told me the story. So I laughed when Rabbi Yaakov asked me that question. I told him, I'm going to be able to sit and learn as long as I want. Like I'm a very wealthy boy, I can learn as long as I want. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky told him, I don't want you to learn as long as you want. That's not good for me. I want you to learn as long as you now want to learn. Because in 3 years, you might decide you don't want to learn anymore. Right now, you want to learn for 10 years? That's what I want. I don't want you just to sit and learn in Koil just as many years as you feel like it. No. I want you to learn in Koil as many years as you feel like now. So it's similar to the svara that we're saying here in Tosfos. Sure, I could specify specific nedarim that I want. But how do you know that when she actually makes those nedarim, how do you know that I'll still want them? Therefore, it's considered a kiyum b'tos. Gewaltig. Let's see the heilige Gemara weiter. Iboilahu. The Gemara has a shayla. L'Rabbi Elazar, according to Rabbi Elazar, who holds that you could be made for a neder in advance. So how does it work? Do you say meichal chalin, the nedarim marchal for a split second, and then the afora pounces on it, uvetelin? So it works like a regular afora. The nether is there, and the afora undoes the nether. Or maybe loy chalin klo. Maybe when you pre-made for something, the nether is not chal at all. What's the difference if it's chal for that moment or not? Zok to Gemara, the nafkamina is very, very simple. The atvis achrina b'hadei nidra. So, for instance, she said hareini nazira, and he said, and someone else said vani. So, if her naziris was chal for a nanosecond, well, then the hatfasa was good. Im amart chalin, if her naziris was chal for a moment, havya tefisusa, it would be a good hatfasa. And although her nether was mufar, the person who said vani, he remains a nazir. But he amrit loy chalin, if you're going to say that they're not chalaral, that for prevents the nether from even taking any type of root, well then loy ikim mishasha. Then there's no nether here at all for someone to be matmas on. So even if she said Iranian Nazira and someone said vani, the vani has to be vani the same as you, but your naziris was never chal, so that tfasa wouldn't work. What is Allah? Let's see the Ran for a little bit of extra explanation. So the Ran at the bottom of the Amud Aleph says as follows. Zok the Heilige Ran. The Rebbe Lazar Meichel Chaylin Ubetelin. The Rebbe Lazar the Omar. The Motzi made for Nidrei Kodim Shetidar. According to Rebbe Lazar, who holds you could be made for a nether. Even before your mother at Morgan. Mi Amrina, do you say the Ois in the Nedarim Shenodra? La'acher Afara Chayli. Do you say that the Nedarim that she made are actually Chal for a second? The Afara Loy Ma'akvu Behu. The Afara will not prevent them from being Chal. Umiu Batli Luhumayat. But as soon as they are Chal, they now become Batal. Oidoma Loy Chayli Klal. They're not Chal at all. Kivan Shehaferla Kodim Shenodra. Because he made the Afara before she made the Nether. What is the nafkamin? Is up to Gemara the atpis achrina v'hadei nitra. Kigoyin shenadr hiba nazir v'acher v'amar v'ani kamoya. I amrit chaylen uvetelen have tivisusa. If in fact her nazirus was chal for a second, and then the afar took it away, well then it's a good hatfasa. The nehida betila luhumiyat, even though her nazirus will be bottled right away because the afar sets in right away. Afilu achi. Even the chayli matzi mataspu. Since they were chal for a second, the va'ani has something to rest on. The chi'amar va'ani chamoya, when he said, "I want to be like her," ahareini nazir de ka'amra ka'amar. He's referring to her kabbalas naziris. Her kabbalas naziris was good. I want to make that same kabbalas naziris. Hers was mufar, but the person who said va'ani, his naziris was not. V'loy chayli, if it's not chal at all, lekach shosha. But if we say that the pre-hafara doesn't even let the nether take root at all, even for a moment, then that fasa wouldn't be good.
So there is, and he said about me, it's more, if it doesn't mean it's said in the first second, if it's chal on Zidus Mishra.
So it's that I think the Ran is addressing that when the Ran said the chi'amar v'anicha moya. So even though it was mufar already, when he said vani on what you said, so there is something, because otherwise how do you time it to say vani at the right time? And that's something that I want to discuss. When we say that it's chal for a second, and then the hafar sets in, how long is it chal for? Is it a nanosecond? Is it 2 minutes? And you have to get your vani in the exact time. So the chlor, you don't have to get your vani in at the right time. I'm referring to her Naziris, which was a good Naziris. I was moved for later, that doesn't matter. So we're going to see how long it lasts for. But I just want to finish the round first. Umak shahacha, the oilam has a kasha over here. It's a very important kasha. And this is really what you were touching on, or Chaim was touching on. Vafilu tema chaylun ubetelin, even if they're chal and then they're bottle, still hechimotzimapis. Didn't we have exactly such a case? And in fact, the people who were matfis on the nether that became nullified, their atfasa doesn't work either. We had a shaila dafid aleph. There was a piece of basar shlomim that was achar zrikas damim. That means you're allowed to eat that meat. Anyone's allowed to eat that meat. It was sitting here on the table. They hid v'sei basar achar, and someone came along and took another piece of meat that was completely chulin and said, "Zeh kazeh." This piece of meat should be like that piece of meat. And the Gemara wanted to know, does that bring any isser on it? The Iboila, kamatvis v'asr, when he says this should be like the shlomim, does he mean it should be like the carbon shlomim before the zrikas dam, where the meat was asr, and he's trying to create isser on this new piece of chulin? Or bidater dahashta kamatvis. He says zekazeh, he meant it should be like this basar shlomim after the zrika, where it's mutter, v'shari, and therefore the meat would be mutter. Umaskana de beter kamatis. And the maskana of the Gemara was that when he said zekazeh, he means like it is now. So if I say vani and it's already post afara like Chaim asked, so then weiter it shouldn't be a good naziris. You could say that you can't bring a rye from there. The shiny hasam, the amar is zekazeh. He said this meat should be like that meat. Therefore, you say his intent is if he wants this piece of meat, A, to be like B, I want A to be like B is right now. But in this case, she said Harani Nazira. Behind matbisba v'amar vani, and he responded and said vani. Mashma vadai de benaziris de ka'amar kamatvis. Clearly, from the context, he wants to become a nazir. He doesn't mean I want to be like her. And if it turns out that her husband was made for her in the Nedarim and the dance that I don't even know about, I don't really want that. There's no Havamina here to explain what he said that he doesn't want Naziris. He said, well, he wants Naziris. But if I said Zekazeh, I mean, I am comparing it to a piece of meat that's mutter now. So there it's legitimate to say that's what I meant. But here, it's not logical at all to say that he meant anything other than that he wants the Naziris, that she was makabel upon herself. The Naziris. And you see that in the Gemara Naziris in the Nazir as well. That we're going to write. They ask another Baba Dikakasha. Let's say it is chal. It still shouldn't work. Let's say the kibbutz the at this ba, since he's basically saying I want the naziris that she has. Well, if till nitra kama, since her nether, her naziris was dissolved through the afara, if till nami high, he should also be bottled. Why do I make such an argument? Because we learned the Gemara that says that the dina the matvis hachihu. We know the halacha is when you accept a nether, but you don't make your own nether, you just latch on to a previous nether. Well, then the fate of that previous nether determines the fate of your nether. And we had a Mishnah. If someone said Hareini Nazir, the Shama Chavei V'amar Vani, and then so Reuben said Hareini Nazir, Shimon said Vani, and then Levi pointing to Shimon said Vani, and then Yehuda pointing to Levi said Vani. So everybody is piggybacking on the fellow before him. The halach is kul and Nazirin. They all are Nazirin because they're each piggybacking on somebody who's a Nazir. But huter echad mehen. But if the first guy, if you pull out the first domino, he becomes mutter. Huter kul, they're all mutter. So why over here should be any different? If he said Vani and her Naziris was nullified through Hafara, why don't you say that the person who was matvis is also no longer a Nazir? The whole pile of cards falls down. Il nami prepared dal the we had this before. Amar dibishatolam zebozeh. When each one said, "I want to be like the fellow before me," harisha and hutru, harisha hutru kula. So how come it doesn't work over here as well? Zaktiran, there's a fundamental difference between that Gemara and our Gemara. It's not a kash at all. The loitmar huter echad men hutru kula. When you say the whole stack of cards falls down, that's one. Why was the first one huter? Not because someone was made for another. It's because he went to a chacham, and what does the chacham do? The chacham says the whole nether was a nether batos and was never there in the first place. So you piggybacked on a nether that you thought was in place, but in fact there was no nether in place at all that you were piggybacking on. It shows us that in fact what you piggybacked on was a mirage. There was nothing there. The basra. And therefore, the second person who said Vani, he said Vani to nothing. Avul Baal. But here we're speaking about a farah. The nether isn't nekal l'mafreya, el mikana laba. As a matter of fact, if she makes a nether not to eat this piece of cake, and she eats the piece of cake, and then the Baal is made for her, she's mechuyev in because the nether was in full force until her husband made that a farah. So therefore, Zaktiran, Apapisha Hutter Arishon, even though her Naziris was moved for by her husband, it doesn't make a difference because the Hapasa was on her status before the Afara, and that never changed. She always was a nether, she was always a Nazir for that period of time, which only got cut off once her husband made that Afara. Therefore, Apapisha Hutter Arishon, Inach Bisurayu Kaini. All of those people who said Vani, they still have the Isser, She'ein Hatfasa Shalahem Batal Bakach. Their Hatfasa won't be batal just because her husband cut off the nether Mikanu Lehabah. But Achakam cuts it off Lemafreya. It's as if there was never a nether. So therefore, your whole Hatfasa was on a non-nether. Gemara, it's a proportion Gemara. Zoktaran, Bereish Perik Misha Omar Hareini Nazir, which we're going to learn soon. The Garas Hasam, the Gemara says over there, Iboilahu, Baal Mi'akar Akar Omega's guys. There's actually a question how a farah works. Does a farah work like Sheilas Chacham, where it makes it as if there was never a nether in the first place? Or Omega's guys, it cuts it off, Mikanu Labon. Lamai Nafkamina. And the Gemara says, what's the difference how Hafara works? Leisha Shenodr Ben Nazir. a woman who is not even Nazir, Vishama Chavrata, and her friend heard, V'amar Vani, and she said Vani. And after that happened, Vishama Bailo Shal Rishoina V'hafrala. And then the first woman who was Makabal Nazir, her husband said, no, I'm being made for you another. Yamit Maker Akar, if you say that the husband's afara works, Lemafreya, and it's as if she never made that nether, Ahinami Ishtari, the woman who said Vani, her nether has nothing to rely on, and therefore she's no longer an Nazir either. Or not she no longer, she was never. The Amid make his guys, but if you hold that the afara only works by cutting it off, Mikano Laba, Hahi Ishtari, the Chavarta Asura. They were both Nazirim at the time, so therefore her friend, when she said Vani, was a good Kabbalah Naziris, and then the first woman, her husband, came along and cut it off moving forward. But of course, up until that point, she was a good Nazir.
But you see here also, it said even by the way, when the second said Vani, it went on her status, right? It's not on what she said.
Well, that's not what the Rav says.
Verstaat, but just Mashali. Then no, when somebody was piggybacking on the other one, right?
Right.
And Vani, and if someone's Mishal, if the word Vani meant I want to be a Muslim, because he said this what it is, then I don't say I want to be like her. My if I was using it that I'm going on the words that was what was originally said, and here I say it goes on
I think what it means is not on the actual words. I want the chalosh that she made for herself. Whatever she was makabel upon herself, I want that kabul.
So the same thing. The other person, he made a kabul. He wanted something.
I'm not saying I want what he said. I want what he actually did. The kabul that was actually chal on him, that's the kabul that I want. So if it was chal even for a moment, there's a kabul there. But if it was never chal, so you're right. The lotion of the Iran is he wants her dibur. He doesn't really want a dibur. He wants the impact of her dibur. And I made another mistake. I verstanden when it says Vani means a man. A man heard her say Vani Nazir, and then he said Vani. Here the man said no, a man didn't hear her. She was in there Nushim. Another woman heard her say Vani Nazir, and the woman said Vani. That's what it says over here, right? The Isha should not driven also. Vani. No, okay, so tomorrow. Toshma. Toshma. So now the Gemara wants to bring a ride to be pushing the Shaila. But before we push the Shaila, I wanted to mention how long, if we say that he was made for in advance, it's chal and then it disappears, how long does it last for? A nanosecond, a mashu, right? That's what you would think. But that's not what the Rush tells us. Let's look at the Rush. Very fascinating. The itvis achrina b'hada nidra kegoyin she'amar hareini nazira v'shama echad v'amar vani v'soich kedei dibur. So Chaim, you asked, when do I have to say vani? I said you can say vani anytime. You're going back on what she meant, because otherwise, how am I going to ping to that second? Zok the Rush, no. But if you say vani later, it's too late. You have to say vani right after she said it. Why? Zok the Rush, unbelievable. Even though we're saying that the hafar is chal right away, so if it's chal right away, even if I say vanim teich dibur, it took a nanosecond, and her nether is not there anymore. Zok the Rush is not a nanosecond. It takes time for your pre-hafara to be chal. Hainu b'chedei sheyuchol habal loymar mufar lechi. The nether will last as long as it would have taken the baal to say mufar lechi. So we're not just saying that the chalois of my hafara happens after the nether. We're saying my actual maisa hafara occurs after she makes her nether. And therefore, it will take, in order for my maisa hafara to be transferred as if I was being made for it at that time, it takes a second to say that, mufar lechi. And within that period of time, before he would have completed the sentence, mufar lechi, u'besoich zeh, amar vani, he had to have said vani. So it's unbelievable. Because the Rosh is saying like what Chaim brought up originally, and that is you have to chap on the nether while it's still hot. Once it's gone, it's too late. But the other Rishonim seem to learn that no, even though the nether is moved already, I can still be matvis on that issue that was calling you for that nanosecond, even though today it's not there. So, but the Rosh you can't. The Rosh you could only say Vani, you could only be Matras in the Nether if it's still actively there, and therefore Zok the Rosh, it is actively there for a second. It's a big Kiddush, but that's what the Rosh says. Okay, Zok the Helig Gemara. So the Rosh basically says that if you want that far to work, you have to rush to say Vani quickly, because otherwise you're going to miss the time frame that you could say it.
It takes time to say it.
That's right.
So it isn't.
So that's why you have to rush and say Vani.
Two to go.
But it doesn't matter how fast you run, there's still a time, it still takes time. to say it.
Right. So you have to say Vani.
Yeah.
If you want to be Matras and her in his ears, you have to quickly say
But
Vani.
even saying Vani takes time.
Yeah, but Vani takes time, but Vani takes less time to say
Yeah.
than Mufer Lechi. So if you rush, you can get it in that window. Okay, Tashma. So the Gemara is going to now try to bring a ride to the Shaila. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. What did Rabbi Eliezer say in our Mishnah? He made a kavachayim. Im hafer nedarim shabo l'chlal iser ma'adecha husband. Could be made for nedarim that have already taken root. They have power to them. So that's a big koyach to be made for to uproot such an iser. Lo yafer nedarim shaloi bo l'chal iser. Surely he could prevent nedarim that weren't even chal yet. So what are the words that Rabbi Eliezer used? Nedarim shaloi bo l'chal iser. So clearly, in order to have the kavachayim, you have to say that the nedarim were never chal. Otherwise, it's the same thing. Shmamina loicholim. So you see, in fact, that they're never chal. Zokimar, you don't have a right from there. Mikatani she'enon boyin. He didn't say lo yafer nedarim she'enon boyin l'chal iser, that will never see the light of day. That's not what he said. It's shaloi bo katani, meaning adayin lebo. It just means that he's making the afar at a time where the nether didn't come yet. But of course, once the situation unfolds, the nether will come, and then his afara will be chal upon it. Gewaltig. Zok the hele Gemara weiter. We have a couple of minutes, so let's do the run. It's a beautiful run. Tashma, Omelon Rabbi Lozer. Im hafer nedarim shabo l'chaliser. Zok the Gemara, Shema mina loy chaylin. You see, they're not chal at all, because the words that Rabbi Eliezer used were lo yafer nedarim shaloi bo l'chaliser. Nira be'enai, Zok the Ran, the mishum hachi mashmalei to loy chaylin. What exactly is the point of the Gemara's kasha? How we see from Rabbi Eliezer's words that the nether is not chal at all. Nehid lishna the masnisin le'dayakach. I believe we need to change the girsa. So let's look at the tziyonim over here. Afal gav, the lishna the masnisin le'dayakach. Even the Mishnah is not mashma like that. Which in the bishlama im amrit loy chaylin. If you would say that they're not chal at all. So what the Ran is saying is that it's more than just being the daik in the loshen. It's actually the kavachomer wouldn't make sense if you're going to argue that the nether is chal. Should the bishlama I amrit loy chaylin? If you will say that if he makes the afar in advance, the nether is never chal. Isay le kavachomer. You have a beautiful kavachomer. The afar mevatelas nedarim shecholu kvar. If afar could be mevatla nether that was already chal, it can surely stop a nether from being chal in the first place. But if you're going to learn that when you make a pre-afara, the nether is still chal, and then the afara sets in later, my kavachomer. Why is there a kavachomer? Even the chaylin harebo l'chlalis. So it's not a kavachomer; it's the same thing. And the Gemara answers, if you're right that the nether is not chal at all, the Tana didn't express it properly. That they will never see the light of day. The high lishna mashma, the afar ma'keves behu shelo yavod. Such a lashon is mashma that the afar stops the nether from ever being able to be chal. It doesn't say that. What it does say is the shaloi bo katani. They haven't yet come into existence, but they will. The mashma da dai lebo elishasayf anovay. The lashon is mashma, in fact, that they will come into existence. It just we're talking at a time frame where they have not yet come into existence. She didn't make them yet. It must be from the lashon of our Mishnah that the Tana holds that they will be chal, and then the afara will take them off. But you still have a kavachomer. What's the kavachomer? They're both the same. Zok Duran, this is going to be the kavachomer. If Afara could be mevatla neder that already had the issue take effect, and at the time when she made the neder, there was no hafara at all. Her husband only heard about the neder later and only made the hafara later. Surely a neder that while she made them, there was already a hafara ready to pounce. The hainu hafara bal. You still have the kal v'chomer, even though in both cases the hafara is only chal after the neder chal. But in one case, when she made the neder, there was no hafara hovering ready to pounce. Here, when she made the actual neder, there was already a hafara waiting to pounce. That was the first right. Now we go to a Tosefta. Toshma. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer told the Mazoy. He told the Chachamim, Avad hafara should be allowed in advance. Uma b'mokim shein mefer nidre atzmai. A person cannot be made for his own nedarim, right? So a regular person, a man, cannot be made for his own nedarim. Mishanodar. Once he made a neder already, right? He has to go to Mishar Lachochem. He can't get rid of his own nedarim. But nevertheless, mefer nidre atzmai achlo yidar. He could be made for his nedarim before he makes a neder, and that's what we do by kol nidre, right? We announce that any nedarim that I make should be bottled, right? We say it by a Torah nedarim as well. So madach a man where once the neder is so strong, he made it already. He can't be made for it, but he could deal with it in advance. Mokam shemei for nidre ishtoi. So if he could be, so in a place where he could be made for his wife's nedarim, misha tidar, even after she made the neder, ein din. Surely she offered nidre ishtoi ad sheloi tidar. Surely he should be able to be made for them in advance. So that's a good kasha, yes, right? You're telling me that he cannot be made for nedarim in advance. Let's think about it. What's more difficult to do? To be made for nedarim in advance, or to be made for nedarim once they're there? I'll prove it to you that it's harder to be made for nedarim once they're there. What's the proof? Because any person could be made for his own nedarim in advance, but cannot be made for nedarim once they're there. So if he could be made for his wife's nedarim once they're there, surely he should be able to be made for her nedarim in advance. Zok to Gemara, this is what Rabbi Eliezer said. So let's analyze his words. You see, Rabbi Eliezer is comparing the nedarim that his wife makes, that he should be able to be made for in advance, to the nedarim that he makes, where we know he could be made for them in advance. So my love, the ishtoi dumya delay. Let's say that we deal with the wife's nedarim just like we deal with his nedarim. Mahud lo'chaylim, just like him when he made this hafara because he announced in advance to be mevatlas nedarim. We don't say his nedarim are chal. We say the whole neder is a toast meikari. So after ishtenami, so too when his wife makes it and he's made for it in advance, it's batal meikari. The lo'chaylim. So you don't have such a raya. Hachadisa v'achadisa. His taka nedarim are batal in advance, and we want to bring a raya that her nedarim should be batal later. You still have the kal v'chomer. It doesn't mean the mechanics have to be identical. His nedarim, when he says kol nidre, are never chal, but her nedarim, which are using hafara, would be chal, but he could be mevatel them. But he still has a raya that it's easier to get rid of nedarim before they're taking effect than after they're taking effect. Let's see the route. Beautiful route. Toshma umam b'mokim shein mefer nidre atzmai mishiyidar k'dichsiv lo yachel devar. He cannot be meichel his words. He has to keep his words. Sure, he can go to a chacham. Nevertheless, mefer nidre atzmai achalo yidar k'darim b'perek arba nedarim. We learned this earlier in the Masechta. If somebody wants that none of his nedarim should ever take effect, Yamoid Rosh Hashanah, he should stand on Rosh Hashanah. The Yomer Kol Nedarim Shani Asad Lidar you B'Talem. So my love, the Ishta Domi delay. The same way his nedarim he can dispose of in advance, so too he can dispose of his wife's nedarim in advance. And let's say that they work the same way. The Bahu Gabnu Gufei, the Matir Nidrei Atzmai, in the same way that he's able to dissolve his nedarim in advance. And how is that specifically? The Hainu Shaloya Choylu Klal, that they don't take effect at all. The Dain Rabbi Eliezer Kavachomer Nidrei Ishtoi. That's how Rabbi Eliezer is making this Kavachomer. Mahu, the Loy Chaylan, just like by his nedarim, we know they're not even chal. The Ihava Chaylan, because if they would be chal, even for a second, have a tzarech heter chacham. His t'nai wouldn't work. His t'nai only works to stop his neder from being chal in the first place. Because once they're chal, he has to go to a chacham. So clearly the mechanics of the kol nidre is that his neder is not chal at all. So if we're making a comparison to the way he's made for his wife's nedarim in advance, avishtenamid lechali klal. So tomorrow you don't have a raya that it works the same way. Hachid Isa, V'Hachid Isa. Alpha Gav Der Belozer Yalav Kal V'Chaymer Min Nidrei Atzmai L'Nidrei Ishtoi. Even though Rabbi Lozer makes the Kal V'Chaymer from Nidrei Atzmai to Nidrei Ishtoi, Lav De B'Dam L'Kamri. It doesn't mean their mechanics are identical. The Didei Lo Chaylu Klal. His Nedarim, when he says Kol Nidrei, are not Chal at all. But do the Ishtoi Chayli. But when he's made for his wife's Nedarim in advance, they'll be Chal for a moment, and then his Afara will set in. And you could still have a Kal V'Chaymer, because it's a good Kal V'Chaymer. Freaked around a bomb kasha. If you have a Kal V'Chaymer, that just like he could nullify his Nedarim in advance, so too he should be able to be made for his Nedarim in advance. Well, why don't you use the Kal V'Chaymer full blast? Why don't you say that he can say the Kol Nidrei of his wife? And then he shouldn't have to make a far at all. Because you're being freaked around. The ligma nami mi Kal V'Chaymer today shelo yechaylu nidrei ishtei klal kishem shein chal nidrei atzmai. Why don't you use the Kal V'Chaymer to actually tell us that he can actually prevent the Nedarim from being chal at all?
This now looks like a little bit close back.
Oh, so you're saying beautiful. So that's what the Ran that's what the Ran touches on. The nearly you couldn't say that. You should the nidrei atzmai hainu taima the hechad the asni meikara. Mamish like what you're saying. The hechad the asni meikara loy chayli klal. You know why when he makes a t'nai on Rosh Hashanah, any nether he makes is not chal. You should the kivan the shokach t'noi b'shas nidroi. Since he forgot his t'nai when he made the nether, havalei nether b'tos v'lei chal klal. So that makes him to a tos because he already declared he doesn't want any nedarim, and if he makes a nether, clearly it's a mistake because he forgot what he said originally that he doesn't want any nedarim. There's no tos here. There's no tos that you could say that the nether is bottle mekar. All you have is the chiddush in the Torah that the husband can be made for. You can make a kavachayim that it will work, but you can't say it works the same way because it simply cannot work the same way. There is no tos here. The chiban the benidra atzmai, ashkechan, the ta'usa the common nidroi, mevatel nidra, kodim sheyidor, just like by his own nedarim, his mistake of having forgotten his tanai will nullify the neder in advance. Nevertheless, in the same circumstance, if he already made the nether was chal, he would not be able to eliminate his nether. He would need a chacham. The chol neder, shu nodar, the pesach neder tosu. Every nether that he made, it's a pesach, it's neder tos. The mali imatin lamemar. What's the difference if we could say the ilu yadamai the asni meikara loya yenoider umali imatin lamemar ilu aviyadai pesach the yada hashna loya yenoider david achasi. If you think about it, the way he nullifies his nether in advance on his own is through a pesach. Had he remembered his night, he would have never made another. Yet a pesach after he makes a nether is the same thing. Had I known some other thing, so you see that for the pesach of post nether, there I need a chacham. Yet for the pesach of pre nether of the night, I don't need a chacham. So how can you possibly explain? They're both a pesach. So how come this pesach works and that pesach doesn't work? They're both a pesach. I made the nether under a mistaken premise. So how come it works if I made it time before? If it's working with the same mechanics of a pesach and the pesach needs a chacham. So what do you have to say? What's pshat? Then he did a high gavna, even though under the identical circumstances, the same pesach, I can't use it after the nether. Rather, I need a chacham. But if you made the t'nai before, it does work. Right? And there's no reason why it's not two different mechanisms. The same mechanism that does not work after for him to do it by himself does work before if he did it by himself. The choshgein baal, surely a husband, the bedinu the nema, the bahu gavna the mefer la'ach shenod reishtoi, the same method of hafara. If he made the hafara after his wife already made the nether, the hainu shemefer the derea me hafara ve'elach v'le akale meikar. The hafara of a husband is not oikert meikar; it's a hafara from now on. Mefer nami achaloi tider shuchalun uvtel kenirli. So there's two completely different mechanisms. The same mechanism of Pesach we find works without a chacham if the Pesach was there before, like at night. Yet after the nether was chal, the Pesach needs to be administered by the rabbi. Kol shekain a completely different type of mechanism of a farah. If it works without any chacham, post nether, surely it should work pre nether. So that's the argument that Rabbi Eliezer is making. Tashma. The next raya is a little bit more complicated. We're not going to be able to do the whole sugya because it goes on to days, but we'll get started at least. Tashma. Amru loy leRabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim responded back. This is not in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we don't see the response. But here, the Chacham hit back, and they hit back hard. And we're going to have a whole bunch of different pshatim in what this is over here, and the different kersoyas. You're telling me that logic dictates that it's easier to prevent a neder from being chal than it is to be oikerit once it's chal already. And how are you proving it? You're proving it by a man who made a t'nai before the neder. There he doesn't need to be shoyal to a chacham, yet afterwards he would need to be shoyal to a chacham. So that's your proof that it's easier to prevent a neder from being chal than it is to remove it after it's chal. Well, I'll show you the opposite. Uma mikvah. A mikvah shemaila es hatmei mutumasim. The mikvah can take someone who's tamei and make him tar. Yet ein matzah al tar milatame. If you go into the mikvah with a sheretz, you're going to be tamei. So the mikvah, if you're tamei already, you can take the tumah away. Yet it can't prevent tumah from coming. So this blows up your whole theory. Adam shein maila es hatmei mutumasim. So the Ran is going to tell us that there are shittas who stop here, and the next three lines they're not even goyres because we already have enough information. You have a kabel chomer that it's easier to prevent something from mikvah. You see, it's not easier to prevent something. So that's a kasha in and of itself. But there are those who are goyres the next three lines, which adds a dimension to it. Adam, a person she'ein maila es hatmein mitumasan. A person, let's say there's a ring that's tamei, and a person swallows it, and then it comes out. Will that become tar? Of course not. It's the same ring. It was tamei when he swallowed it. It's tamei when it comes out. Adam shein ma'il tatmei mutamasim. Einoi din who shlo yatzal ha'tayrin milatame. So therefore, shouldn't it prevent the ring from becoming tamei? What's the halacha if a person takes a ring that's tar and he's tar and he swallows the ring, and then he goes in to an oil hameis, he becomes tamei, but the ring does not become tamei, because we're going to learn that there's a halacha that tumah belua, something that's inside his body, does not become tamei with oil hameis. So you have the svara, you have a svara punkt for carrot. Mikveh, you see, can take tumah away, yet it cannot prevent something from being tamei. Well, a person exactly the opposite. A person could prevent something from being tamei, but he won't be metired. So we'll get into the details of this Kavachaimer tomorrow, but it's going to be a very interesting sugya looking at these different factors here. Okay.
And the Yosy